Today's episode of Marku 42 is sponsored by Audible.com, which has more than 180,000 audiobooks and spoken word audio products, including tons of Doctor Who audios. Get a free audiobook of your choice at www.audibletrial.com/Marku42.
Hi, I'm Jim Sorenson. I'm a writer for Transformers with IDW Comics and Fun Publications, and you're listening to Marku 42.
Welcome to Marku 42. That's right, Marku 42 here on Krypton Radio. I am your host, Mark-Baumgarten, and with me, as always, are
Patricia-Helm.
And I am Optimus Prime. Freedom is the right of all sentient beings. Actually, it's Megatron. You will all bow down before me.
Oh my god. No, real name.
I'm just kidding. It's Eduardo-m-Freyre.
Who else do we have?
This is Cobra Combat. Starscream. Oh, hell, I was patty-hawkins.
See, Ed, that's the way you're supposed to do it. Who else do we have?
And I'm Christian-basel, now with Kung Fu grip.
Yeah, we know. We've seen the arrest records, Christian.
Yeah, today's show is a very special show for us because it's the first show where we legitimately go beyond the Whoviverse. Yes, We've got Transformer and G.I. Joe comic writer Jim Sorenson on the show today. He's got nothing to do with Doctor Who, except that he's a Doctor Who fan, and we'll be interviewing him later in the show. But first...
But first we go to Doctor Who news, not Transformer news, not G.I. Joe news, with our Doctor Who correspondent, Patricia-Helm. Patricia, are you more than meets the eye?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
You tell us.
Oh, well, everyone has seen the promos for Lego Dimensions, right? All the cute little commercials and everything. Well, it's been announced, and BBC's confirmed this, that Doctor Who is going to be included in that.
Oh!
Yes, it's a video game that basically combines all of the different Lego universes together, like Lord of the Rings, the Lego Movie, Wizard of Oz, Back to the Future, and Doctor Who.
So the Doctor could get on the DeLorean in this game.
I guess. I'm not exactly sure how it's all going to work, but I think it's totally awesome that they're going to be able to go through all these different realms of Lego. I think it's so cool.
That sounds like a great video game. I'd love to play it.
I want to play it just to have a sequence where we have Lego Doctor Who and that character from the Lego Movie voiced by Morgan Freeman. That just, come on, the two of them interacting. You tell me that is not just nerd win.
No, I'd rather see the Doctor interact with Doc Brown.
Me too.
Right, Scott!
Trish, when does this come out?
It comes out in September 2015. And it'll be available for the Xbox 360, Xbox One, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, and the Wii U. Carol Ann Ford, Susan.
Oh, yeah, Carol Ann Ford. Yeah.
She says that Peter Capaldi is really eager to see her come back to the show as Susan.
Me too.
She was on the set of Doctor Who talking with Peter Capaldi and was talking to him about people wanted her to come back to the show. And I guess he started running around the TARDIS set going, she's got to come back. She's got to come back.
I can see that.
Because he's an uber nerd. You know, he's a total uber nerd and Doctor Who fan. So...
I was reading some responses to that from people. And here's two things that were brought up. One, now that Big Finish is slightly canon into the television world, does that mean we might get a mention of his great-grandson because of the audios for Lucy Miller? And the second one is that people are saying, do you think Carol should give up the mantle and give it to somebody else to keep Susan going if there is a story with Susan? Do you think she should regenerate? What do you guys think?
You know, have her come back for a while, but then if she decides she doesn't want to do it anymore, then regenerate her.
Yeah, Trish has hit the nail right on the head. Bring her back, have her around for a while, and if she wants to pass the torch,
now hold on.
Pass the torch.
Guys, I gotta tell you something. Just because you're a Gallifreyan doesn't mean you're a Time Lord. She did not go to the Academy, possibly. She may have left Gallifrey with the Doctor before she became a Time Lord. If that is the case, she does not have regenerative powers.
I'm sorry, I don't exactly know all of the classic Who stories.
Well, they
Where did
haven't
she-
explained
where did
that.
she-
I'm just saying.
It's
I
always,
know, but
always
where
been
did-
nebulous, but I kind of like the idea of her having a single solitary lifespan. I think it'd be fascinating to see her being more aged than Capaldi and having, she might have had a family with the guy she stayed on Earth with.
Well, she did. And they had a
The
kid
Big Finish.
according to Big Finish mythos.
Yeah.
If you go by the Big Finish, I know you're big on it, but I believe that the show, even though there was the nod and Night of the Doctor and stuff, I still think it's kind of like we're not going to consider it canon until we really bring it into the show. So it's a pseudo canon, It's not expanded universe. I would like it for it to be canon because everything I've seen of it seems awesome. I just be a little leery of okay, we're really going to trust Moffat to do it right. We've been burned by that fire before.
You know what? I think in any case, if they were to bring her back, whatever route that they would take, it's a slippery slope. Because on the one hand, let's say you make her a Time Lady and she regenerates, whoever comes after Carol Ann Ford, they're coming after Carol Ann Ford, the original Susan.
Okay.
And it would be probably even worse than when Hartnell passed the baton off to Troughton. Then if you don't make her a Time Lady, you would have to come up with a story that would be really spectacular in order to give her like a final goodbye that would not set the fandom in a rage going, "You killed Susan! How dare you! What right do you have to kill Susan? Susan's gone!" Any way you slice it, we're talking kid gloves here because you do it the wrong way and you're going to deal with a fandom riot in your hands.
Again, too, it's going to be the older fans, and of course, I think a majority of the new fans might be a little befuddled by the whole thing. I mean, she's like the Valier to a lot of other things. She's a big unexploded bomb in Doctor Who continuity, and it's got to be diffused and it's got to be done right. And I would rather be done very, very right or just not at all. I don't want to see this half-assed, and I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. I think we don't want like a Captain Kirk in Generation situation where
Ooh.
they killed them off and it's like either way you slice it, people were unhappy.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I've heard anybody who's happy with what happened with either
Hell.
the original or the what they ended up with.
Shatter wasn't even happy with it. It was his idea.
Yeah.
And I think we all agree that Carol doesn't go unless Carol wants to go. If she wants to run that thing for another 20 years or whatever, that's her role. That's her deal. That's her thing. Susan is
hell
her.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's hers.
Definitely.
Speaking of people we want back in the show, John Barrowman's been talking about Captain Jack.
Oh, has he?
Yes, he has. Of course. When does he stop?
Exactly.
I was about to say the same thing. What does he stop talking about it?
Well, he thinks it would be very silly if he didn't return to Doctor Who someday. And he says that he's the one that's, been keeping Captain Jack's character alive because he keeps on promoting him and keeping him out there. And
Torchwood's coming to Big Finish.
Torchwood's, exactly, is coming back in audio form anyway.
Oh.
And he said that the producers for Arrow have told him that they would let him go do it. But he hasn't been asked, so he doesn't know if he ever will be.
Now that he's the Raja Ghul, he doesn't actually have to be in every episode. So.
Oh, great, Mark. You
No.
just dropped a spoiler
Come on.
for
We
Trish.
are 2 weeks past the final episode of the season.
She needs to catch up.
Which season are they on? Or did
3.
it just end? 3?
Season
See,
3.
I've only watched like the first 5 episodes of Arrow, so by the time I get there, I'm going to forget all
Yeah, there you
everything
go.
I just
Okay.
said. So I don't even remember what name Mark just said.
Yeah.
They lost me when I was considering chopping into it, but then when I saw, the Wildcat was like a 25-year-old dude, I was like, nah.
I got to admit, Patty, I'm kind of with you in the sense that when they introduced Wildcat, it really wasn't how I would have done it. But I do have to admit, as far as with the beginning of the show, it was a little bit of a slow burn for me. But once I saw that they were really opening up the DC universe, being imaginative with the way they brought stuff in, I was like, okay, I'm sold.
And the fact that the Arrow and now the Flash are cameoing in each other's episodes. I just love it. It's a universe, a DC universe.
Well, and they're also doing it the right way in the sense that when Flash showed up in Arrow, you didn't have to be watching The Flash in order to get what's going on. When Arrow showed up in that episode of The Flash, you didn't have to be following what was going on.
Yet he was wearing the outfit that he should have been wearing if you were watching it.
Right. But you didn't
continuity.
need to be watching Arrow in order to understand the outfit change.
No.
And they also linked the 2 appearances together, but they did it in a way that didn't require anything. Arrow was just like, oh, and by the way, I'm going to need your help with something. I'll contact you later.
And he does the next week.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but enough about DC TV. Back to Doctor Who. Trish?
We're talking about Doctor. Yeah.
So this next bit of news is really more for our UK people that listen because, unfortunately, this is happening all the way over in London. They announced that there's going to be a Doctor Who festival in November at the Excel Convention Center over there. Yeah, I think they're going to need a big place for this.
Yeah.
Peter Capaldi and Stephen Moffat and Jenna Coleman are all going to be there. And probably some other people from the show. Most of the crew is going to be there. And I read it. It sounds cool, but it sounds like it's going to just really focus on the 8th and 9th series. It's not going to be anything really like classic Who, which I thought that's kind of disappointing in a way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they did just do the 50th 2 years ago with the big celebration that had a lot of people from the old show.
Well, it's going to be mostly about how they make the show.
Ah, okay.
Is really what it's going to be about.
Well, that sounds interesting.
They're going to have panels with the cast and also the crew, so you get to find out how they do things. And you get to have pictures taken with them. You can get your pictures taken on the sets of Doctor Who from Series 9 is what it says.
Right.
You get to see props and costumes from the latest series. So I'm like, that's the part where I was like, really? They're not going to have like Tom Baker's scarf or Sylvester McCoy's umbrella. I don't know. I think that they're trying to get to the new Who people, and I think maybe, I'm not sure if the older fans are going to go for it.
However, if you got a plane ticket and free tickets, would you go?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Well, if it was free.
Is that an offer, Mark? Is that part of our bonus this weekend?
Mark's got the hookup. Mark's got the hookup.
But if you want more information, you just need to go to DoctorWhoFestival.com.
DoctorWhoFestival.com.
That has all the prices and information.
You know, I wonder how it syncs up with the next season.
It's after the season's over, before the Christmas episode. It's in November.
Interesting, because it makes me also wonder what goodies are going to be in store at this festival that they can't talk about now because it would ruin...
Well, because it would ruin the whole season if they talked about any of it.
So, this is sort of a spoiler, but
Should
sort
I
of
hit
not.
Spoiler alert?
Please, we need to torture Christian. It's a weekly thing. We need to have our...
All right, here we go. And
Ow.
Okay. All right, it's off. It's off.
Ow.
It's off.
I know it's off, but it still hurts.
Oh.
He's having PTSD for the...
Pretty much, yeah.
So they announced that actress named Rebecca Front is going to be in the episode with the Zygons. Now, she was a regular on The Thick of It with Peter Capaldi.
Yes. Yes.
And she's also got a Jenna Coleman connection. She was in a BBC movie called Death Comes to Pemberley, where she played the role of
the sequel
to Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Yep. She played the role of Mrs. Bennet. She's the mother of the Bennet girls, and Jenna Coleman played Lydia Wickham, but as her married name, she was Lydia Bennet.
Now she's an award-winning actress, isn't she?
Yeah, she's a BAFTA award-winning actress. She and Peter Capaldi actually won BAFTAs the same year for The Thick of It.
Cool. Oh, then this should be fun. This should be a fun episode.
No details on who she's going to be playing, but I bet it'll be good.
Me too.
So our last news story is not really kind of a news story. It's just, I don't know, this is actually we're going to get a little tabloidy here.
Oh.
So Prince Harry was seen flirting with Jenna Coleman at a polo match.
You know.
No.
All right. All right. That woman sold her soul to the devil. I just... Oh.
Now she's supposed to be dating, what's-his-face from...
Not for much longer.
Not for much longer. Now,
Richard Madden, a.k.a. Rob Stark.
Rob Stark.
Yes.
She's going for a bigger prize now.
Apparently
a real prince.
Apparently at the party afterwards, he grabbed her hand and they went aside and sat down in a corner and they were just talking and leaning into each other, and he had his hand on her knee and all this stuff. So whether or not it was innocent, I don't know. But
Oh, do tell me what happens next season. Oh, please. Do you fight Dominic?
Yeah, are we gonna? Yeah, I'm wondering. Next week, are we gonna have another tabloid thing where Richard Madden and Prince Harry got into a bar fight?
No.
Prince Harry versus Rob Stark. Are we gonna have Prince Harry versus Rob Stark?
No, he put his hand in the wrong place, and then she slapped him so hard he regenerated.
You know, I want to be on the show so desperately, but grandmother won't allow it.
As far as tabloid journalism is concerned, hasn't Harry been like in the tabloids before?
Oh yeah.
Wasn't he the one that got in trouble for the inappropriate Halloween costume?
It wasn't a Halloween costume. He just showed up to a party wearing a brown shirt with a Nazi symbol. It wasn't
even Halloween.
No, it wasn't even Halloween. He was also pictures of him shooting pool naked with some
okay, yeah, he was. Okay, yeah.
And then of course there's the big rumor, which is he's not really Charles's son at all.
Oh Lord!
All right, you know what? I think we're going to stop there because we don't want British royalty upset with Marku 42. I don't think so.
And we do not want to offend our UK listeners.
No, definitely not.
We really don't need the SAS on our tail.
Well, then I apologize to all monarchists out there, but we are Americans after all.
Yeah, we are Americans. We believe in democracy with a president.
Who paid for it?
Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay, well, that's it. We're going to get Trish. We're going to be getting knocks at our door.
Hey, at least I didn't say we believe in Marxism because we are Marku 42.
Oh. Wow.
Great. We're going to have, we're going to have MI5 on our tail. We're going to have SAS on our tail. We're going to have, great. That's just wonderful.
And if you want to complain, you can write to Mark at
Mark@marku42.net.
And he will personally answer every single one.
Exactly.
It's his fault.
It's my fault, so I will answer them all.
Put in the subject line, WTF.
Yes.
We're going to have British intelligence on our tail. Which, by the way, if anybody from British intelligence is listening, I am perfectly prepared to go stool pigeon. Okay? That's it.
The NSA is listening too. The NSA is listening too, and I want to make sure that they know that I am a loyal American.
Yeah,
the NSA is not bothering us.
The Brits of the Americans are.
We don't have that
buddies,
kind of rating.
So they have
Hey, if they'll listen to my phone call about ordering a pizza, they'll listen to this radio show. Trish, do we have anything else?
Let's go on to the birthdays.
Let's see if we can piss off anybody doing that.
Well, I hope we don't tick off Colin Baker because his birthday was June 8th, which was a couple days ago because our show airs on the 10th. So I missed it last time. It was my fault. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do better. And our other birthday is jumping to June 16th is Carol Ann Ford.
Oh, Carol Ann Ford. Were we just talking about?
We're just talking about her.
Yeah.
Moffat, what better birthday present than bringing Susan back?
Exactly.
Hey, come on. Good birthday present. Come on. You know you want to.
And that's all the birthdays.
Well, cool. That's the end of our first part of our show. Stay with us because right after this commercial break, we're going to have our first Beyond the Hooniverse interview with Jim Sorenson, comic writer for G.I. Joe, Transformers, and a number of other things. And we'll be talking to him in depth right after this.
So transform and roll out.
Oh, boy.
Attention all Whovians! While you're waiting for the new episode of Doctor Who, start your own adventures with a book from Marku 42 Books. They carry unique and rare books at affordable prices. Visit Amazon.com/shops/Marku42. That's Amazon.com/shops/Marku42. Marku 42 Books. Set your imagination free into the Whoniverse.
Hey, I'm Gary.
I'm Mike.
I'm Chuck.
And I'm Justin. Join the four of us every week on the internet's #1 and longest-running G.I. Joe podcast, What's on Joe Mind?
It's Joe news, reviews, and interviews like you've never heard them before, delivered right to your MP3 player.
Our guests include Jason Marsden, Kevin Michael Richardson, and Matt Yang King from G.I. Joe Renegades, Larry Hama, Robert Atkins, and John Barber from IDW Publishing, and many more from around the online Joe community.
Yeah, it's guys talking about Joe. Think of it as Joe Talk meets sports talk. And we make fun of Chuck.
Right, and we hey, again? Come on, Chuck. We're just kidding, kinda.
Sometimes Chuck makes fun of himself.
Right, and okay, seriously, this is just getting ridiculous now.
It's What's on Joe Mind, every week on the Geekcast Radio Network, InsidePulse.com, Stitcher Smart Radio, and iTunes. Download and listen today.
I suppose I still can't say something about Transformers, can I?
Good.
No. What about sports?
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's all right.
Welcome to Doctor Dr. Geek's Moment of Science. Here is the lab director and your human host, Dr. Geek.
Hello, everyone. I'll be with you in a moment. I just have a few more adjustments to make before we can get on to today's Moment of Science.
Hurry up, Geek. I hope you didn't ask me here just to watch you work. That's what the hidden cameras are for.
Did you say something?
Oh, nothing.
There we are, all set to go.
So what are we going to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night.
Try and take over the world?
All right, you got that reference.
What reference?
Try not to think about it. For today's Moment of Science, we're going to talk about jetpacks.
Oh, right. Science from fiction. Okay, we will do it your way, for now.
Thank you?
You're welcome.
Right. Anyway, did you know the first jetpack was invented in 1919 by the Russian inventor Alexander Andreev?
No, I never heard of him.
Well, that's probably because Mr. Andreev's concept was never built or tested. But I'm sure you're more familiar with the hydrogen peroxide-powered rocket packs.
Our new line of hair care products? I don't see how bleaching one's hair relates to flying around like a rocket man.
It doesn't.
I thought so.
In this context, the concentrated peroxide's being used as a propellant.
Oh, that does make more sense.
I thought so. Anyway, while this type of jetpack can be constructed under workshop conditions, there are still many drawbacks to the classic design. Chief among them is the high risk in their operation. The classic design has a flight duration of under 30 seconds, and you have to fly below the minimum parachute altitude. Using a jetpack might look like fun, but it's dangerous.
You're right. It does look like fun.
Didn't you hear what I said? Only experienced test pilots.
Why? Doesn't yours work?
What?
Does it work?
Well, of course.
Excellent!
It just doesn't, technically land.
Get me down!
Don't worry, the fuel cell will run out. Eventually. In the meantime, everyone should apply their geekdom.
This Moment of Science was brought to you by Dr. Geek's Laboratory of Applied Geekdom, a Brazen Wench production, copyright 2015, in association with this network. Join the adventure. Download the full Labcast at www.drgeeklab.com and follow us at facebook.com/drgeeklab and twitter.com/drgeeklab.
Kid? Yes? Shut up.
Beyond the Night is the GCRN's latest review podcast. We are covering everything in the Knight Rider television universe, from the classic 80s TV series to the 1991 reunion film, Team Knight Rider, and the 2008 relaunch series as well. So join TFG and Mike and Dion the Music Man as they go in-depth and Beyond the Night only on Geekcast Radio Network. You can find Beyond the Night in iTunes and on www.geekcastradio.com.
Kid?
Yes, Michael.
Just keep driving.
Hello, I'm Katie Manning, and I played Joe Grant in Doctor Who, later to become Joe Grant Jones in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and you're listening to Mark Who 42. Isn't that the answer to life?
Welcome back to Mark Who 42. Yes, this is Mark Who 42. I'm your host, Mark Baumgarten. With me are Eduardo-m-Freyre and Trish-Helm. And we've got a very special guest from Beyond the Whoniverse. We have Jim Sorenson, who is a comic writer for Transformers and G.I. Joe.
That is correct, although I think saying I'm a very special guest might be overselling it.
Doesn't oversell it for me. I think we can count you under the very special guest category.
Maybe moderately special.
I think everybody on Facebook that's part of the Transformers and G.I. Joe fan community would probably argue for the very special category.
And let's also remember what Mark Twain says, that if you're using the word very, you can always substitute the word damn, and it usually works a little better.
I like Jim. He's a good guy. So, Jim, for those of our listeners who are Doctor Who listeners who don't know about your work and don't know about you, could you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. I'm a big geek. I've been a fan of robots specifically since I was, I guess, about 4 or 5 when I started watching Star Trek and Star Wars. Star Wars had been out the year after I was born, but Empire Strikes Back came out when I was about 4. And my parents took me to go see it, and I just fell in love with it. Didn't really understand that much of it, but fell in love with it and thought R2-D2 and C-3PO were great. Never really grew out of the robot phase, and today I professionally get to play with robots in terms of writing mostly Transformers, but also some G.I. Joe stuff and actually some other stuff that might be coming out in the not too distant future that involve at least tangentially robots. And found Doctor Who on PBS reruns back in the sort of mid to late 80s. Thought it was really pretty neat. I especially, I guess unsurprisingly, liked the Daleks and the Cybermen. And when the new Who came out, I thought it was really neat and got on board and haven't looked back since.
Cool. Now, I understand, I'm just going to put this out there. You were born on July 15th.
That is correct.
That is my birthday, too, so congratulations. Oh. You win the prize.
So what's the birthday prize, then?
The birthday prize is that you get to be on our show. Hey, that worked out pretty well, didn't it?
Didn't realize that was the big prize. Well, I guess there's about a 1 in 365 and a quarter chance, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Does it work for any podcast or only you, Mark? Because otherwise my odds would go up a little bit.
You realize what this opens the door for, right? Jim is in New Mexico. Trish and I are pretty much right next door to him. We should fly you to New Mexico, Mark. We should have a giant party, mix in the Who fans and the Transformer fans. I think we're talking blowout here.
I think so. That sounds fun.
We're talking blowout. So, Jim, if we could step away from Doctor Who for a moment, how did you get started with IDW? Because you've done a lot of work with them.
Yeah, I think we're coming up on 10 or 12 books, something like that. And nothing I can specifically talk about, but we've got more coming out in late 2015, early 2016. But my first book came out in 2007 with them, and I'd been pitching it to them for a little while before that. And that was a book of character models called Transformers the Ark. And if people aren't familiar with the way animation works, what happens is when you want a character to appear in a show, or not just a character, a vehicle, a prop, pretty much anything, an animal, you need to draw out what that character looks like in a static pose. And if it's somebody or something that's going to be showing up frequently, you'll probably want to do it from multiple angles. Hanna-Barbera, for their main characters, would do 6 or 7 sheets, each of which would have 4 or 5 different poses, so you can see what their facial expressions look like. And that's called a character model. And if a character's on model, that means that you're drawing to that model. And some shows, Hanna-Barbera was always very big on making sure that you were very close to that model. I think Simpsons is the same way. If you're animating The Simpsons, they don't want Homer Simpson to look too different than what his baseline is supposed to. He has a certain number of set expressions. You might go off that for a specific joke, but they tend to be hesitant for that. And Transformers is no different. In fact, Transformers has quite interesting character models because for virtually every character, not only do you have them looking like a person or, robot, a metal person, more or less, somebody wearing armor is mostly what they draw, but they almost all have at least one extra mode, perhaps a tank or a jet or a gun or a tape recorder or something else. So it meant that intrinsically it was an interesting subject matter. And I had been interested in animation models probably since about 1997 or 98. I found some online. I didn't really know what they were, but I thought they were neat. I figured out what they were, started collecting them, and I sort of amassed probably the biggest collection of Transformers character models in any one place that anyone else had had. And I thought, it'd be neat to share this with the world. And around 2005, I started thinking about how to do this. And one option was putting it up on a website. I was a little bit ambitious. I thought it would make a good book and pitched it to IDW. And eventually, after about a year or so, they said yes. I was persistent. It was a black and white book because in the 80s, animation models were mostly done up in black and white. You would do maybe one image of the character in color so you could see what the colors were. But if you can imagine what the process was back then, you would be dealing with the writers and the designers in California, but most of the animation would be done in Asia. So rather than FedEx color copies, they would fax black and white copies. So most of the images were just done up in black and white. So the book came out in black and white, which helped keep costs down, and it was successful. And IDW asked if I wanted to do a sequel. cool. So we did. And then we wound up doing another book for the then current Transformers series and sort of snowballed from there.
Now, you also did the animation models for G.I. Joe.
That's correct. I don't remember where exactly in the order that fell, but I think it was around maybe 2010 or so. We pitched effectively the same book, but for G.I. Joe, and that came out. And I think that's one of the things that caught your attention. Isn't that right, Eduardo?
Yeah, actually. I was going to say, in addition to the 2 volumes of the book that you brought out, Field Manual Volume 1, Field Manual Volume 2, you also did appendices that showed up in the G.I. Joe Collectors Club newsletter. For anybody who is not familiar with the article I posted on our website, in the most recent edition, Jim actually had some animation models for the episode My Brother's Keeper, and it included some con-goers at a sci-fi convention who were cosplaying, and a couple of the costumes were Doctor Who related.
Oh, wow.
We had a Zygon, we had something that kind of sort of looked like an Ice Warrior, and we had a Cyberman.
I'll be perfectly honest here. The only one that I caught there was the Cyberman.
The Ice Warrior was you kind of had to be paying attention because the model seemed to have tweaked it somewhat from the original design, thinking they were
working from memory. I mean, if you think about the time, right, this would have been about probably 1985 or 1984 when they were doing the illustration. So they wouldn't have been able to just go online and download a picture. There wouldn't have been any commercial home release. So that might explain any discrepancies.
Ice Warriors had last appeared in the 70s in Monster of Peladon.
There's about a decade or so difference. Now, my question is, Jim, how did you get a hold of this animation model? Like, how'd you find it?
I believe that one, I think most of our Season 2 models came from a collector who was down in the San Diego region, because that would have been from the second season. And the way I did the G.I. Joe field manuals were I did one volume that was Season 1, and then about a year later I did a volume that was Season 2. And when Season 1 came out, G.I. Joe fans who picked it up and realized that they might have something that would be of interest started getting in touch with me. And I'm always looking for more material. I enjoy the hunt, I think, as much as I enjoy the actual dissemination of the models. Not just models, but other sort of artwork as well. And just as an aside, I used to mostly collect Transformers toys, but I sort of got away from physical collecting. And now I consider myself mostly a digital collector. I try to get high quality scans of the vintage artwork from back in the day, the production side artwork. And it's not only easier on my wallet, but also it doesn't take up any space. And I can carry it around with me in a hard drive. So if anything happens to it, I have another one. If you can swing it, it's a good way to collect. It scratches the itch. But in any event, once the first one came out, I managed to get in touch with somebody who had quite a lot of the original animation models from Season 2 and late Season 1, which was unfortunately out of scope for the book. And usually you're talking about copies, because as I said, they're black and white illustrations, and they tended to get photocopied and faxed around. So the quality diminishes a bit. So my co-author and I, Bill Forster, did these books with me, had to teach ourselves how to do art restoration to make the images still look good and pop. But he didn't have copies. He had originals. He actually had the hand penciled and then inked illustrations. So the quality on that, just phenomenal. Yeah, you hardly ever see that for animation models, partially because nobody thought to save them. You know, the artist would be in a studio they wouldn't usually go into work. Some of them would, some of them wouldn't. A lot of them would work from home or from their own studio, and then they would send in the copies. And then you could toss the originals. You didn't need them. There was no perceived value to them at the time.
Sounds kind of like what the BBC did to all those old Doctor Who episodes.
Exactly.
Wiped them, made room for new stuff.
And unfortunately, it's a lot harder to restore the kinescope version of a TV show than it is to restore a photocopied or faxed version of a black and white illustration.
Another series of books that you've done was called the Allspark Almanac.
Correct.
Which was character profiles of the show Transformers Animated done from an in-universe perspective. You actually had characters who existed in the Transformers Animated universe talking about different characters.
Yeah, that was fun to do.
Who came up with that idea to do it in universe like that?
That evolved naturally out of the way we got the material, because the first 2 books we had done, we were hunting down and restoring black and white vintage animation models, which is a time-consuming and a labor-intensive process. When we were doing the Transformers Animated, that show was on the air. So we just literally, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, we just drove to Burbank with a hard drive, and we went to the studio, and we said, give us all your animation models. And about 15 minutes later, they said, would you like anything else? And we said, sure, give us all your backgrounds. And then they said, anything else? And we said, well, sure, give us all the storyboards and scripts. And they said, anything else? So stop having things to ask for. So we had blocked out probably 6 to 8 months to work on this book. Now, you still have to do the layouts and contextualize the images, but that's actually much quicker than it is to take a degraded, thrice faxed across the ocean image and redraw the parts that are starting to fade out and have the line weights match up and have it look fairly seamless. And, we got better with that as we went along over time. The first book, you can see some of the work that we did was a little amateurish. And also some of that is we got better at finding original material. But in any event, we didn't have any of those issues with animated. So we wound up with this surfeit of time. And what we probably should have done, what probably would have been smart, at least in a short-term perspective, would have been to just crank out a book that was a lot like The Ark, which is very stark, just the images without a lot of context, just the images and a name and in a logical order and be done with it. But instead, we decided to use that time on the editorial side, and we decided it would be more fun to do little bios of the characters. And then, because animated is, for people who don't know, is a really lighthearted, fun Transformers series, we thought, well, let's try and capture some of that. And having a third-person omniscient narrator be fun is hard. Some people can do it, like a comedian like Dave Barry might be able to do it, but it was hard for us. So we thought, well, let's just have the characters talk about each other because they have interesting personalities and quirks. And that had a side benefit, which is that it's impossible to talk about others without revealing something about yourself. So in some ways, it almost doubled the amount of information we were able to present, because when Bulkhead talks about Sorry, he's giving facts about Sorry, but you also learn about Bulkhead in the process. So that worked out well, I thought.
Yeah, it also, the way that was done also kind of reminded me that Dreamwave, when they had the Transformers license, did examples of that in their More Than Meets the Eye books.
Yeah, that's a good example, another way of doing it. They were a little bit more, I think, formalized. They tended to be more reports and a little bit more dry, but they still were in universe.
Well, and you still had, like, I think Mirage, that was written up by Cliffjumper, and he was kind of like, what is it with this guy? Why is he on our side? So...
Classic dynamic.
Or Starscream wrote about Shockwave, and, it was kind of like, this guy's more than he seems, we got to watch out for him. But taking what we're just talking about and swinging it back to Doctor Who, IDW no longer has the license. Unfortunately, the license stopped at the end of 2013 after the 50th anniversary. But as just a little what-if question to pitch to you, Jim, if they still had the license, would you ever want to do for Doctor Who what you did for Transformers, the Allspark Almanac?
That could be a really fascinating project. I'd say the caveat would be that working with a live action property as opposed to animation has a whole different set of challenges. Certainly there's production artwork for Doctor Who, and there probably is a market for a Doctor Who book of production artwork, but that's not exactly what you're asking about. I think it would be an interesting project, but it's not necessarily one that speaks to my specific expertise, if that makes sense.
Although I gotta say, when I thought of the idea, I was even thinking, who could write what? I'm sure everybody would get a kick out of a bio of the Third Doctor written by the Brigadier.
One of the challenges with the Allspark Almanac was trying to come up with the character that would, A, have an interesting perspective on this character, and B, be fun to write. So with Doctor Who, there would be sort of the obvious choices of getting the Doctor to talk about the companion to talk about the Doctor. But then, as you say, when you start to bring in some of the secondary characters, definitely there's some interesting potential voices. Like maybe it'd be interesting to hear what the Master's wife thought about him,
That would be good, yeah.
John Sims is written by Mrs. Sims.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So, Jim, you are a Doctor Who fan from way back.
Casually, yeah. The reruns I was watching started in the Tom Baker era.
Yeah, us too. Yeah.
Yep.
Went through about Colin Baker. I never really got past him.
Oh, you never got to Sylvester?
No.
What happened with Colin Baker that you weren't able to continue on to Sylvester?
It wasn't me. It was my local affiliate stopped airing them as far as I could tell.
Oof.
They never went back to the Pertwees or the Hartnell and Troutons on your PBS station?
I saw a little bit of Pertwee from video stores.
Right.
By that point, you could find a few of them. I don't even think they were licensed, but there was a comic book shop that used to have bootleg anime, and I think they
a lot of comic shops had bootleg anime back then.
How about the only way you could get certain anime was bootleg?
Oh, yeah.
That would be the early 90s, so yeah. But I saw a little bit of him. But I think Peter Davison was probably my favorite.
Peter Davison was your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Baker was great, but something about Peter Davison I really connected with.
Of all the Peter Davison companions, which was your favorite?
Hard to say. I don't know. Perry, maybe.
Oh, okay.
It's been a while.
But I'm guessing not for the obvious reasons.
Well, you think about how old he was. Yeah, it might have been completely for the obvious reasons that he liked Barry.
He would have been a little young then, still.
Maybe.
Well, we're not as old as you, Mark.
That's true.
Well,
I'm that hurt, Trish. That I'm feeling the pain.
And since we're talking Peter Davison companions, what are your thoughts, Jim, on Adric?
Oh God, thanks a lot.
Mark, you knew we were going to cross this.
I set myself up. I did.
He didn't bother me. I kind of thought the way they wrote him out, like even as a sort of 12-year-old, maybe 12, 13-year-old, I kind of thought the way they wrote him out felt a little off to me. I wouldn't have phrased it this way at 12, but it felt like an odd dramatic beat even at the time.
When you watched Doctor Who on your PBS station, I guess, where was this?
New York.
New York. Oh, so you were watching in WOR.
I suppose so.
Yeah, if you were in the city or Long Island.
I was Long Island.
Wow, we grew up in the same area.
What part?
I was in Huntington Station.
Oh, okay, I'm in Babylon.
It's not that far.
Oh.
It's pretty close. So yeah, WOR showed it on Saturday mornings. They showed 2 episodes of the Tom Bakers with the last episode of Doctor Who with Howard Da Silva narrating. Oh, that was terrible. But I lucked out. By then, I had moved to Florida, and Channel 2 in South Florida eventually showed everything. We got the Hartnells, we got the Troutons, we got the Pertwees. We got everything. So it was cool. So growing up in New York as a Doctor Who fan, could you tell people that you were a Doctor Who fan?
I used to go to school with celery on my shirt.
Oh, my God.
I eventually had to switch to broccoli because the celery just wilted too fast. True story. I could probably dig up pictures.
Not everyone can wear a decorative vegetable.
No, it takes a special type.
Yes.
To be fair, Tricia, it's not entirely decorative. It also will turn different colors in the presence of toxins. So.
Yes. And if you eat it, it helps the poison.
Did you start watching the new Doctor Who right when it came back?
Within a few months. I started watching on Sci-Fi, and it was a little annoying with the cuts, and eventually I started just getting the DVDs or, on demand as the era progressed. I think I probably started when Eccleston was still the Doctor.
Fantastic.
Of the new Doctor Who, who's your favorite Doctor?
It's really hard to make that determination because they're all so good. Rankings always feel somewhat artificial to me.
Okay, well, let's not rank, or if we do rank, put your reasoning behind it.
Without overthinking it, which can be a problem for me. I'm an analytical person by nature and by training, but I think Tennant pops into my head for whatever reason. So I'm gonna go with he was a lot of fun to watch. He did that great mix of lighthearted and yet with that edge of tragedy that was always sort of welled up but walled off. I thought he did that really well. Although, all of them were good. Eccleston was fun just because he was so different than what we've seen before. He really seemed like if you were going to do a Doctor Who movie, that would not be a bad person at all to cast, a theatrical release.
What do you think of Peter Capaldi?
I think he's great. I kind of like having an older Doctor again.
Yeah, me too.
I was despairing. I kind of felt like he was just getting younger and younger. And I can see why for production reasons, but it kind of felt like the Doctor could be any age. The Doctor could be anything. So when they did Smith after Tennant, it kind of felt like they were retreading the same ground, at least when they were first announced him.
Yeah.
I think Smith took the character and made it his own and did a very good job with it. But that was my initial thought when he was announced. I said, they're going really young with him.
Well, see, I was afraid when Smith said that he was leaving the show, I was afraid they were going to go for the Twilight market and we'd have even a younger Doctor. And I was like, I'm not watching this. No.
You say that.
I know I say that. Everyone says that. I'm not going to watch the new Doctor, and then you watch him and you like him.
They would have cast some fantastic 17-year-old and you'd be like, wow, this kid is amazing.
Yeah.
And they would have come up with a plot line to explain why he doesn't look like he's 17 anymore.
But at least I wouldn't be one of those fangirls who are like, Peter Capaldi, he's so old.
Is that a thing?
That was a thing.
Oh,
it was
on
on YouTube.
It was online.
It was terrible.
I've very much enjoyed what he's done with it. But like I said, I've enjoyed all four of them. I kind of like that they've gotten away from the will they or won't they romantic tension with the... because that felt like... They did a good job with it, but it never felt like an element that needed to be part of Who. And I'm kind of glad they've moved away from it.
Yeah.
Thank you. See, we have a guest who's agreeing with me.
No hanky-panky in the
TARDIS. No hanky-panky in the TARDIS. Unless it's something like Amy and Rory. If it's a married couple in the TARDIS, okay, they can hanky-panky each other.
Yeah, but then their kid becomes a Time Lord, so no, you don't want hanky-panky in the TARDIS.
If I can just babble and free associate, I really liked better when he was plastic. I'm not saying leave him behind. I'm saying keep him with you. But having a plastic centurion like adventuring with you, that's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Although having him married to Amy, that just creates a lot of stuff that shows up on DeviantArt, which I don't know if we want to go there.
Jim, when you got to see the 50th anniversary show, did you see it in the theater or did you watch it on TV?
In the theater, which is really hard because I had a 6-month-old or so at the time. So I had to beg my wife to let me out of the house. I just don't see movies these days. I have to wait for them to come out on home video. But I made time to go down to the theater, partially because my book club is big Doctor Who fans, and they were going, and I wanted to get that experience. So that was a lot of fun.
When Tom Baker came out, what was the reaction at the theater? What was your reaction?
I thought it was a really nice gesture. It wasn't raucous cheering or anything at the theater. The audience, I don't want to say they were subdued, but it wasn't. Not just with him. I think with the whole showing. I mean, partially it was a midnight showing, so I think a little bit tired. But I think people were very much along for the ride. There wasn't a whole lot of spontaneous applause. There was laughter, especially at the beginning when they were fooling around with, covering up your eye and, looks like the person next to you is a monster, sort of. But I don't know if you had that. I assume you did. I assume that was universal. Sweet, I guess, is the word that comes to mind. It's like, that's sort of nice.
I'm going to go away from Doctor Who for a second because you mentioned the fact that you don't get out to films anymore because I guess you have the young child. What do you think of, and this is a good question that is in honor of Ed, what do you think of Michael Bay?
Oh, God.
I had to ask Ed. Like you had to ask your question, I had to ask the Michael Bay question.
I have an interesting view on Michael Bay, and that is that I think Michael Bay gets a lot of flack. I think Michael Bay gets unfairly maligned for being a hack, and I think he is absolutely not a hack. I think people call him a hack because he does movies that sort of have this odd lowest common denominator factor to it, but I don't think he's pandering exactly. I genuinely think Michael Bay is an artist with a vision, an auteur who has a way that he sees the world and wants to present this in his films, and I think he succeeds. I mean, it's a strange worldview. It's frenetic. It's a worldview that is definitely sort of somewhat orthogonal to reality, but it's a worldview that clearly is appealing to millions of people. His films make billions of dollars. He does them under budget and on time, and I don't really see how you can fault him for any of that. So I would say Michael Bay is probably a genius.
Ed, your rebuttal?
Okay. No. Jim actually brought up some good points. I do have to say part of my opinion is also colored because I know people who have worked with him and they don't have a high opinion of him. But I do have to say that I can't, I don't know, maybe it's just that I'm not the audience. And maybe it's just that I have, having grown up with Transformers, I have just an attachment to it that, is... Well, much like any fandom that has an attachment to a certain franchise. And I just kind of find it, there's a little bit more... Okay, let's be charitable here. I mean, I usually say he's a little bit more style over substance, but let's just say a little bit more towards the visual than towards the subtextual. And I just kind of feel that while on the surface, Transformers looks like something that can favor that sort of approach, from looking at various projects and iterations like Generation 1, especially the Marvel run, and looking at things like the IDW Comics, it can actually be something that can have some meat inside. So, just a pure focus on explosions and whatnot just feels like it's missing the mark.
But Transformers has been around for over 30 years at this point. Transformers has gone through dozens of incarnations, and it's proven that it can be many things. Certainly, it can be a serious exploration of socially relevant themes as has been proven by the current IDW writing team. On the other hand, it can be this explosion, eye candy-filled, slightly surreal romp through the cinematic landscape that Michael Bay presents. It can be sort of weird, off-color Japanese Lolita porn. It can be.
Oh God!
And
you're talking Kiss players, aren't you?
It has been. Yes, that's my point. And it's been everything in between. It's been charmingly delightful shows aimed at very young children or slightly older children. It's been some pretty interesting novels. It's been virtually everything. It's been some great video games. It's been some terrible 80s Commodore 64 video games. It's a flexible enough property that it can be all of those things.
I'm still holding out hope somebody does adaptations of the IDW comics.
I think that if you really want that, you're more likely to get that in the form of a television series. But even then, it's unlikely because writing isn't that hard. I mean, it's work, it's sweat, it's craftsmanship. But ultimately, if you're running a show, it's not that hard to come up with a competent writer who's going to want to tell their own story. And they'd most likely rather tell their own story than adapt somebody else's. It's more creatively satisfying, I think, for most people to tell their own story than to adapt someone else's. So whoever's making the current Transformers series, they probably will draw inspiration from and elements of the current IDW series, as well as past iterations of comics and novels. But I think that they're going to want to put their own spin on it. And I think that's healthy and normal. And ultimately, it's probably better for the brand, because if you really want to read about the DJD, the Decepticon Justice Division, you can, because it's out there. You know, you don't need to go see it on the small screen.
Getting it back to Doctor Who, there's sometimes talk, serious, semi-serious. It's kind of gone back to serious because supposedly this was part of the leaked Sony emails. Do you think Doctor Who could work if there was like an American production of it?
I would be highly skeptical.
What would you be skeptical about? Because, I have my issues. I just think that there's elements of Doctor Who that are just so uniquely British that it's kind of impossible to bring over without just seriously diluting it. And we were just talking about it. We're talking about the hanky-panky and the TARDIS. You were like, that's something that was handled well, but, really doesn't need to be in Doctor Who. And I just keep thinking that an American production would probably want to bring that back because, well, you need to have the romance, need to have the heat between the leads.
That's a good example. But I think in general, my concern would be that it would get Hollywoodized. It might be a good standalone movie, but my suspicion is, and of course it could be way off. There's some studios, like the Marvel Studios, has done amazing jobs with adaptations and keeping tone. But in general, one of the concerns about adapting a property to a different medium, especially if you're doing it from a different cultural perspective, is that you're going to lose quite a lot of what makes it special and try and make it look like everything else. So my concern with a Hollywoodized version of Doctor Who is that you're going to get a young, conventionally attractive, quite possibly American lead. And it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. They could go British. We like our British actors, mostly for villains, but we like them. I guess that which would be the inversion of when Fox did it, right? When they had Eric Roberts doing the American villain and the British protagonist. But I kind of feel like he'd wind up looking just like every other action hero, every other sci-fi action hero. Even things like Star Trek The Next Generation, which was this cerebral, contemplative approach to science fiction. When they get to the movies, all of a sudden Picard is riding around in a Jeep and, everyone, they're shooting first and asking questions later, and it didn't feel like Star Trek. That's not to say they're bad movies, and the J.J. Abrams has a similar sort of dynamic, and that's interesting because the original Star Trek was very actiony, and yet it seemed even that they amped that up and dialed down the more philosophical aspects of it. Yeah. That would be my concern, and that's why I say skeptical. I think I would go into it with an open mind, and it's possible that a director that's a fan, or even isn't a fan but understands and respects the source material, could do an amazing job. But my instinct is the most probable way it would get done, the path of least resistance, would be to get a relatively new director, get a star that's young and handsome and muscular, and he'd probably wind up, getting into fisticuffs and maybe shooting a weapon. And you'd have the TARDIS, you'd have a companion, there'd probably be Daleks and maybe the Master, or maybe they'd save one for the sequel, or they'd tease one. But my instinct is that's how they would most likely go.
Chances are the companion would be something like Megan Fox, or a graduated CW IDW actress, and they would see if any of Nicola Bryant's Perry wardrobe is left over.
Just as a slight segue, I'm very much enjoying the current offering of science fiction and superhero TV shows out there, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and and Flash. They're all pretty good. But I do get sort of annoyed with the idea that, here's our scientist and or computer hacker. She's about 22. She's gorgeous. I mean, it's just such a boring trope at this point.
Oh, I so agree.
And I like the characters.
I hate Sky with a passion. I have from the very first episode.
Her name is Daisy.
I don't give a crap.
Her name is Daisy.
It's like all of a sudden she's some badass super spy type person, and it just
and
drives
now
me
she's
crazy.
an Inhuman.
Yeah,
I mean,
just like,
really?
Well, Trish, you do have to admit, at least with the super spy angle, we did see that she was getting training.
Yeah, but
so
not that quickly. My goodness.
Okay, all right, yeah, all right.
It was like, really? She goes from being a computer nerd to being that? Really?
Well, it's been at least 13 months.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe even a little longer. They haven't really touched on what the continuity is, like how long it's taken place.
Jim, we're at the part of the show where we allow our guests to give plugs. What are you working on? What's coming up soon for you?
What can people buy? Come on, what can people buy that has your name on it?
What can we sell for you?
Yes.
There's only a little bit coming out that I'm allowed to talk about at this point. I've been working with the Transformers fan club on a series of text stories called Beast Wars Uprising. That's sort of a reimagining of the Beast Wars universe that's a little bit darker. So far it's mostly been set on Cybertron, though we're going to expand that scope a little bit. So you can go to the Transformers fan club website if you want to check out. There's 2 of those stories out. There's another one that's going to be coming out probably this month. So those are going to keep coming out. In terms of stuff that's come out in the recent past, the 2 that have come out recently are, and we've talked about one of these, is Transformers Animated, the Complete Allspark Almanac, which is 2 books and a comic and some new material all put together into one fairly large, fairly hefty volume. It's 472 pages. MSRP is $40. You can get that a little cheaper if you're going on Amazon or if your local comic book shop offers a discount. And then there's Transformers Legacy, which is about 300 pages, 296 pages. It's an oversized hardcover book. Most of my stuff has been softcover, but this one is an oversized hardcover that covers the Transformers packaging artwork from the 80s and early 90s. The first generation of Transformers as well as the second, which was aptly called Generation 2. And the United States and Japan. That actually, unfortunately, does not cover, it skims a little bit, but for the most part, it doesn't cover the European Transformers that came out in the early 90s, because as far as we can tell, nobody still has that artwork anymore. But if you remember the beautiful airbrushed, detailed, sort of slightly perspective-defying illustrations that were on the Transformers packages back in the day, it's almost all of those.
And do you have the artwork in the back of the package, like the one that,
Yes.
the battle scenes that have like all the Transformers?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love those.
All of those from the US and Japan.
I love those, although what always made me laugh is how you have multiples of characters who, as far as you knew, weren't supposed to have multiples.
Yep. Well, and again, Transformers has had many different interpretations and different artists lending their vision to it. So if David Schleinkoffer, who's doing the packaging artwork for the very first one back in 1984, wants to draw 2 or 3 Ravages, then why shouldn't he be able to?
Although I gotta say, given how badass Ravage is, I think the Autobots would be like, no, one's enough. One is enough. We're good.
And many decades later, the Transformers vs. G.I. Joe crossover that Devil's Due did had an issue where somebody wound up in the future, and sure enough, there were multiple Ravage clones running around. So it works.
Jim, do you have a web presence or anything that people can get a hold of you or look at some of your stuff on the web?
Sure. I keep a blog where I sort of ramble on about science fiction and sometimes tease or promote my work called Disciples of Boltax, which is a cult from the old Transformers Marvel comic. These days I've been going through episode by episode and doing reviews and analysis of Exo Squad.
I just read your latest review the other day. Awesome.
Was that Mindset?
No, it was the one that came after with the Neo Megas.
Ah, yes. Okay. I do them a few weeks in advance and then they schedule them. So if I get busy with something, it sort of keeps popping out. That's why I'm not exactly sure which one I've done.
I'm waiting on your review of the Mars storyline.
Where they blow it up?
yeah, the one where, spoiler alert, yeah.
They blow up Mars. Oh.
Yeah,
it gets better. It gets better.
So.
No, I think my other favorite, God, I forget the name of the episode, but it was towards the end, and it was like a battle in space, and it was Simbaka and Marsh leading the Exofleet.
I want to say, was that Price of Courage? Yeah, that was the Price of Courage.
May have been, yeah. I think that one has probably one of my favorite exchanges of the entire show. You know, Simbaka giving Marsh command of the fleet, and Marsh going, you know, I'm not as high an officer to do that. And Simbaka's response of, well, if you succeed, no one will care. If you fail, there will be no one left alive to complain.
Jim, do you do the Twitter or the Facebook?
I'm on Facebook. I don't do so much of the Twitter.
But you're on Facebook, so people can contact you that way if they want to be a friend.
Absolutely. I'm always interested in hearing what people have to say about the work I do. I like the feedback.
Okay.
Do you do the convention circuit at all?
I do. I'll be at BotCon this year, and I might be at Auto Assembly, where I'm seeing if I can kind of make that work logistically. And those are the two biggies. Sometimes I've done TFCon a few times, not for a while, but you know that's definitely on my radar. And I do JoeCon occasionally when my schedule permits. But the big ones are Auto Assembly and BotCon.
Well, Jim Sorenson, we'd like to thank you very much for coming here on Mark Who 42. We appreciate this.
Well, thanks for having me. And just because it didn't get mentioned, my Transformer alter ego does turn into a Dalek.
I don't know how we forgot that. That picture will be up on the site when this episode comes out. So thanks a lot, Jim.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, you know, Larry Hama, you know, he says, oh, we back? Oh, hey, everybody, we're back. What a great interview with Mr. Sorenson. Unfortunately, I wish I could have been a part of that, but, you know, I was doing something else for this show, I believe.
Yes, you were.
I just can't remember what, but...
doing something
anyway,
special for the show.
But Ed, thank you so much for hooking us up with that. Very fine fellow.
He's a great guy. I mean, we talk all the time on Facebook. You know, there was while he was making the field manual, he would come back to me. He would be like, "Do you know anything about this?" I'm like, "Well, let me see what I can come up with." So you know, we go back and forth. He on his blog, Disciples of Bultax, he's been reviewing the cartoon Exo Squad, and we've gone back and forth about that. You know, I even asked him, where did you get season 2? He's like, oh, I recorded it offline, and, you know, basically he had me then crying because I was like, so there's no official release? Blast it! Still waiting for an official release of Exo Squad season 2. Universal, hey, Universal, Exo Squad season 2, DVD. Hello? Come on.
Well, gang, that's about all the time we have for this episode of Mark Who 42 here on Krypton Radio. Gang, do we have any final words?
Have you got the touch? Have you got the power?
I don't understand that. Patrick?
It's
That's the song.
Okay. It's you know, the Transformers movie, which I declined to see when I heard Optimus Prime got killed off in the first 10 minutes. Sorry, Trish, if that's a spoiler.
But come on.
The movie came out 30 years ago. You had your chance.
Patrick, you got to admit, he went down like a boss.
He did, but he still went down. Although it's funny, too, because, you know, that was Hasbro's idea, and the backlash from that changed the ending of the G.I. Joe movie, because Duke was supposed to get hard killed off in the G.I. Joe movie and replaced with Lieutenant Falcon.
And actually, Patrick, I have a mission for you.
Yes?
Show the 87 G.I. Joe movie to somebody who has never seen it before.
I've never seen it before.
Okay, but when it gets to that part, because see, they had Duke go into a coma, air quotes.
Yeah.
When it gets to that scene, show it to somebody, but show it on mute and see if they react with, oh my God, they killed him? Once they react, play it back with the sound on and see their reaction.
It's basically like the A-Team when they start shooting people up. The truck that they're shooting at rolls over and flips, and then they go, you all right? Yeah, I'm okay.
Oh, so, no. Mark, this is worse. Duke got speared in the chest.
It's rather bloody, actually. It was very bloody. So it was the one thing that they did to make sure they got a PG rating, because kids, boys wouldn't go see a G-rated movie.
No, they wouldn't.
He actually got speared. Like again, just look at the scene where he quote unquote goes into a coma. Look at it on mute, and you tell me if that's not a death scene.
Well, that's all the time we have for Mark Who 42. Don't forget to go to our website, www.marku42.net, and join the Whoniverse Army. Definitely go to our Facebook page, Marku42. Tweet us at Marku42. Wow, that seems to be said a lot, Marku42. Go to FloridaGeekScene.com. Go to GeekCastRadio.com. Go to iTunes. And I put out a request this week, and I'm putting it out to you again. If you listen to the show, and how could you not if you're listening to me say that, please go to iTunes and put a review of our show on there. We'd love to get it. We really would appreciate it. We'd love to get our name, Marku42, higher in the Doctor Who list. And it's down to you commenting and giving us good ratings. Isn't that right, guys?
Amen, brother.
Hopefully the comments won't be, "You helped me revive my childhood trauma. I cried in my room for weeks after Optimus died." Yeah, well, I was shocked too.
And on that note, bye everyone. Listen to us next week.
Maybe Optimus Prime's a Time Lord.
I've been thinking this through. I think if they're going to bring back Susan, what they should do is there's a scene that Jenny walks in and goes, "Hello, Dad," and then Susan walks in skin-tight leather with a big rocket launcher. "Hello, Grandpa."
Bye, everyone. Marku42's Whoniverse has been written and presented by Mark Baumgarten, Patricia-Helm, Eduardo-m-Freyre, Patrick-Hawkins, and Christian-basel. This show was edited, produced, and directed by Mark Baumgarten. Please visit Marku42.net and register to join and be a part of the Whoniverse Army. We can be contacted by email at mark@marku42.net with the subject line ? If you have worked on Doctor Who or are working on a project relating to Doctor Who and want to be on our radio show, please email our media relations director, Christian-basel, at marku42media@yahoo.com. Doctor Who and its properties are owned by the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. This show is owned and copyrighted by Mark Baumgarten, 2015. You're listening to Krypton Radio.